It's a Wednesday in the spring of 2019. I'm sitting in a small theater watching my daughter perform at her dance recital. It's a sunny day, like any other, until I get that text. My phone chimes. I see the words on the screen. I knew instantly the trajectory of my life was going to change forever. The words read, "I have cancer." The pain is like nothing I have experienced before. Harry, my husband of 19 years, the father of our 2 children, has colon cancer and needs emergency surgery tonight. A wave of panic moves through me. My chest tightens. Suddenly, it dawns on me. Oh my gosh, what if I lose him? I start to sob uncontrollably. Harry was the love of my life. We met in Germany when I had just turned 30. I had moved there for work and fell in love with him the first day I saw him. I remember sitting in his office, noticing his warm smile, kind eyes, relaxed, confident energy. And he had these really, really nice hands. Harry was an adventurer. He introduced me to Germany through the eyes of a European, and he made life in Europe both exciting and normal. I was no longer the Canadian living in a foreign country. I was actually living there. We loved to travel. We loved making detours and would take the side roads so we could discover quaint villages and explore beautiful landscapes. Those detours taught me to appreciate the unexpected and to search for beauty in life's unplanned moments. We'd spend the next 19 years of our lives together. And no matter where we were, life was always an adventure. And even though Harry was a planner, which made for a full life, there was no amount of groundwork that could have prepared us for what was to come. That text message was the start of a 2-year battle spent in and out of the hospital fighting cancer. In the 6 months leading up to his death, I often lay beside him in bed, frozen with panic and fear. The stress was intense. My body became so inflamed that I had to put bandages on my fingers just to keep them straight. I was terrified of the future. And that forced me to live in the moment. I became extremely present. I noticed the small things I had previously overlooked. The laughter at our dinner table, the opportunity to go for a walk with my kids, those precious moments in life. Time slowed down. Not because of the hardship, but because we savored and felt the preciousness of every single moment. There was beauty even in the pain. And while those 2 years were the hardest in my life, they taught me invaluable lessons about love, leadership, and what it means to truly live. The struggle of watching Harry through his last 6 months was amplified by what was happening in the world. It was the winter of 2021, the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Restrictions were everywhere, and I was only able to visit Harry an hour a day while he lay in the hospital bed. After 2 weeks, He was terminal. On March 8th, 2021, Harry turned 62 years old. We celebrated his birthday from his hospital bed. When friends called, I held the phone up to his ear. 3 days later, on March 11th, 2021, Harry passed away. I watched him over those 3 days, not resist death, but be at peace with it. As a CEO of a global company that supports seniors through in-home care, I'm used to helping caregivers and families through loss. Losing Harry was a different experience entirely. The permanence of his death rocked me to my core. I was afraid of what life would look like without him. How would I parent my kids? How would I lead a company? As I navigated a life without someone I deeply loved, I learned the importance of how we show up and talk about grief. Death and grief are inevitable in life. In the US alone, over 3 million people died in 2023. Yet, in most corporate workplaces, we still don't talk about grief or death. And grieving doesn't always start upon death. When a loved one is terminal or is rapidly declining due to age, grief often starts much earlier. As women, we are disproportionately impacted because we are often the primary caregiver. As we age, women are also more likely to experience the loss of a spouse due to death. In fact, women 75 or older are nearly twice as likely to be widowed than men. We also live in an aging country where 1 in 5 adults will be 65 or older in less than 7 years. Caregiving needs will continue to be felt more intensely by women. This is a heavy burden, which is why we need to normalize talking about grief. These conversations around grief and loss are still widely considered taboo, particularly at work. Grief is a natural and expected part of the human experience. Avoiding it not only robs us of being supported, but stops us from sharing vital insights on the most precious gift death offers us. It reminds us of how we want to live. As the leader of a fast-growing company, I always showed out with positivity for my team. But by being more aware of my own mortality, I made a conscious decision to not hide what I was going through. I was going to bring my whole self to work. Tears, grief, and all. The permanence of death also gave me so much clarity. Meetings took on a new perspective. The gravity of what I was experiencing made superficial conversations seem like a waste of precious time. Mediocrity needed to leave the building. As heart-wrenching as Harry's death was, it was also an important reminder of the opportunity and responsibility I had in front of me. I had the luck of life, and I wasn't going to waste it. I wasn't prepared to give up on life. I knew Harry wouldn't want that for me also. So I chose to create a life that I could get excited about. I made lists of women who inspired me. I braved asking them out for coffee, and to my delight, many of them remain important people in my life today. And after allowing myself a year of firsts, the first holiday without him, the kids' birthdays, our anniversary, and all those other moments of a shared life, I opened my heart to the idea of dating and eventually falling in love again. At work, my vulnerability was met with pure kindness. As a team, we engaged in deeper conversations with each other. We became closer and performed better. That's where I learned talking about grief can be a powerful tool. Discussing our hardships and loss not only helps us gain clarity and heal, but it has a ripple effect that can strengthen our communities. Grief, tragedy, and hardships are part of what unites us in the experience of being human. So why then are we so reluctant to talk about these ties that bind us? In those early days of Harry's passing, people didn't know what to say. I saw the lowered head, the concerned eyes, or the averted gaze. So I was the one who decided to open the door and talk about Harry. Awkwardness is what happens when we don't know how to talk about grief. I wanted to share my experiences. I wanted to normalize talking about death. I'd approach the topic of Harry's death with friends, family, colleagues, even strangers. There's 4 key learnings that I had that came from normalizing talking about grief. First, we build deeper connections. Talking about my grief helped create a beautiful foundation for mutual trust. And without knowing it, it encouraged others to open up also. This resulted in more trusting relationships and deeper connections. Secondly, we live more purposefully. My conversations changed after Harry's death. At work, I had always taken an interest in my team as people, but I became even more focused on learning about their hopes and dreams. I wanted all of them to live full lives. Third, when we normalize talking about grief, we give license to others to show up as their whole selves. We all hide parts of ourselves for fear of not being accepted. A recent report from Deloitte showed 60% of US workers report covering, a term that means minimizing their identity at work. We do this for fear we will be judged or perhaps overlooked for a promotion. As a leader, I wanted something different. I found being open about my grief helped create a culture where people felt safe to work as their full human self. This must become part of every workplace. And finally, when we normalize talking about grief, we reduce the emotional burden and learn about life. In many ways, we've been conditioned to carry the weight of our hardships alone. We're afraid of being judged for the imperfect parts of our story. Sometimes, we just don't want to burden others with what we are carrying. The truth is, sharing our experiences with grief can be an incredible gift. When we remove the taboo, not only does it help people understand us, but it can acknowledge their own experiences and what they are currently going through. There isn't a single day that passes where I don't miss Harry. The sound of his voice, his sense of adventure, his hands, which my daughter luckily inherited, but I'm also happier than I've ever been. Supporting the person I loved through his death has been the greatest motivator for learning how I want to live. At work, our culture has evolved into one of bold kindness. We operate on a currency of mutual respect, values, and autonomy. I've even braved falling in love again with someone who honors the person I've been and the one I'm growing into. My 2.0 life, as I like to call it, is beautiful. But it didn't just happen. It has been a series of small steps, a conscious decision to not mask my pain or grief, but to face it head on and be open about my journey. I've also learned that when we talk about it, we are not alone. We have a community around us. As we normalize talking about grief, we not only process the journey for ourselves, but we bring comfort to others and inspire them to do the same. Western culture hasn't always allowed people to fully grieve, but it is a gift. And this gift is what connects us all in a human experience. My hope for any of you watching or listening to this conversation is that you can see your own grief in the same way. That talking about it and allowing yourself to go through it will ultimately help you find joy. Thank you.